Our next speaker will be Lena Hoagland Isaacson, and she's with the IASA, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. And her presentation will be on reducing methane emissions from human activities globally and in the Arctic Council member and observer countries. Go, Lena.
Hello, everyone. So, and thank you for inviting me to speak in this event. My name is Lena Höglund Isaksson, and I'm a senior research scholar at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Austria, where I have been for almost 20 years working on methane emissions, so global inventories for methane emissions, as well as policy scenarios, so building scenarios into the future. So maybe you can take the next slide, please. Okay, so let me first just remind everyone why it's important that we reduce methane emissions. As you know, you might know, we are heading for a temperature increase of 1.5 degrees, probably in the next few years. And if we continue with the business as usual, we will pass 1.5 degrees probably around probably before 2050 with only CO2 emissions. So it's really important that we reduce the CO2 emissions. But in the short term, you can see here the lower red line, that's the warming from methane emissions, which is around 0.5 degree only from methane emissions. And so in the short term, one of the few options that we still have to stay below 1.5 degrees is to significantly reduce methane emissions, in particular to keep below 1.5 degrees in the next 2 decades. So let me start with a few key messages from this presentation. You might know about the Global Methane Pledge, which was negotiated in the last COP in Glasgow. The signatories of the Global Methane Pledge is around 113. It was 125 when I did this slide. And they emit about 54% of the global anthropogenic methane emissions. But the Global Methane Pledge signatories, together with the Arctic Council member and observer countries, emit as much as 87% of global anthropogenic methane emissions. For the Arctic member countries, it's the oil and gas activities that dominate methane emissions, and this is also the sector where there is the largest potential to reduce emissions significantly at a very low cost in the next few years. For the observer countries, it's coal mining is the most important sector for reducing emissions very fast, and they account for a quarter of the emissions in the observer countries. And finally, emissions from the waste and agricultural sectors, these are the most difficult to reduce in the short term. So this picture shows now the total anthropogenic methane emissions. And the green one is the emissions that are from the signatory countries of the Global Methane Pledge. And as you can see, I don't know if it's possible, no. If you can see in the right graph, these countries, if they follow through on the pledge, which means reducing collectively reducing methane emissions by 30% between 2020 and 2030. And if they follow through on that, then they will be able to reduce, that's the slope of the green to the right. And it would mean then that we come to a emission level that is comparable to the level where the world was in 2010. So we will need more significant reductions in methane emissions. And here I have split the global methane emissions into 3 different country groups. The first one is for the Arctic member countries, and the one in the middle is the observer countries. And to the right, you have the rest of the world. And as you can see, for the rest of the world, most of the emissions are covered currently under the Global Methane Pledge. For the Arctic Council countries, there is a top level here, which is the Russian Federation, which is not currently in the pledge. So the dominating countries here is the US and Russia. And for the observer countries, you can see that the major players there that are not in the pledge, it's India and China. But if we would combine these emissions, so the ones that are under the Global Methane Pledge with the Arctic Council member and observer countries, we would cover 87% of the global methane emissions. So the Arctic Council could be a fora here for pushing for more methane reductions in these countries that are currently not the major players who are not currently in the Global Methane Pledge, whether it's under the pledge or through some other kind of arrangements. So let us look at also where the different sources are for methane emissions in these 3 groups. As you can see, it's very region specific where methane is actually emitted. In the Arctic member countries, emissions from oil and gas systems dominate emissions. In the observer countries, you can see that there is significantly more from agriculture, in particular rice cultivation, but also from coal mining. And lastly, in the rest of the world, we have then a lot more from the agricultural sector. But in both the observer countries and the rest of the world, we also have very rapidly increasing emissions from the waste and wastewater sectors. And these are the potentials for reductions in the short term. So meaning that the potentials for reducing emissions using existing technologies. So what we can really do in the next 10 years. And here, as you can see, the big reductions is in the oil and gas sectors. That's the brown parts here. And these are reductions that mostly come actually at the net profit, because the gas that you recover or from reduced leakages, it goes to the markets and you can sell it. But it doesn't happen, mainly because of the very high profit margins in this sector. So reductions in methane emissions, even if they are profitable on the paper, it's not enough to compete with a very high profit of actually producing more oil and gas. So we need urgently regulatory frameworks here to really push for binding reductions from the oil and gas industry. And then we have the coal mining, which is China, Indonesia, are big here, as well as in the right one. And there we also have ventilation air methane oxidation technology, which is not coming at a profit, but at a low cost. And finally, for the as I said, for the waste, it's about improving the infrastructure for waste treatment, in particular in many of the developing countries with rapidly growing populations. But the effect of that will probably only be seen after 2030 because of the waste that is already in landfills will continue to generate methane in the beyond 2030. So thank you very much.